Welcome to Stakeholder Analysis, Fact-Finding Techniques. I'm Steve and I'll be talking you through this session, and here we'll be covering some specific fact-finding techniques that you can use to help you to identify the stakeholders for a specific project or for the business organisation that you're working within. We'll be covering 4 techniques: background research, observation, interviewing, and facilitated workshops. Stakeholder analysis, fact-finding techniques. In this session, we'll be talking about some fact-finding techniques that you can use to help you to identify the stakeholders for the project that you're working on and the business that you're working within. Here we have some definitions of the term stakeholder. Essentially, anybody who might be involved in the project that you're working on because they're affected by it in some way. They may be a source of requirements. They have some influence over it. One of the principles involved in stakeholder analysis is to try to think widely, to identify all of the possible stakeholders within common sense limits. Further down the line you can prioritise, but early on the best approach is to try and identify as many stakeholders as possible. And the techniques in this session will help you to do that. There are quite a few techniques for fact-finding that could be used within business analysis, but here we're going to focus on 4 of them that are particularly useful in helping to identify and analyse stakeholders. Background research means looking at documentation about the business in various forms as shown here. The great advantage of this is it can be done without direct involvement by people within the business who may be busy, who may have limited time. So you can look at this documentation, get some background on the business, get an initial understanding of who the stakeholders might be. Observation basically means what it says, observing people in the business environment performing business tasks. And it could be relatively formal, where you're shadowing somebody, being alongside them as they do their job and watching and listening, understanding what they do, what their role is. Or less formal in a general sense, in that an analyst needs to keep their eyes and ears open and simply observe and understand what is going on within the business. Interviewing essentially means talking to people, but in a structured way, more than just a simple chat. It means having some sort of plan and list of questions, then meeting with people within the business, asking a few questions, listening to their responses and responding to that, asking follow-up questions as needed and recording what they say. A workshop is a small gathering of people to achieve a shared purpose. Some people call it a structured brainstorming session. So in the context of stakeholder analysis, you'll gather a group to discuss and analyse who the stakeholders are for the project that you're working on. The word facilitated is used deliberately. It means having a facilitator, somebody to control the process, ensure that it stays on track and on target, stays within time limits and achieves a defined result at the end. So, to summarise, we've covered 4 fact-finding techniques that are useful to help you to identify the stakeholders for the project that you're working on and the business that you're working within. All of them have their strengths and weaknesses. All of them are useful. If you have any questions about this, if you want to clarify something, you're stuck on anything, if you need more information, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. I'll be happy to help. Thank you for listening and for watching. So that concludes this session. I hope you found it interesting. What you can do now is download the notes that accompany the session, have a read through them. They go into a little bit more detail about some of the key concepts, and then you can go back over this session as often as you need to. Once you feel you've taken it all on board, there's a short quiz that you can do just to check your knowledge and understanding, and again go back and review if you need to. You can then move on to the case study that follows this, that goes into some of the practicalities of applying all this. And as I mentioned earlier, and as ever, if you have any questions, please get back to me.